a nightmare to others!
Oh Lord! Oh Jesus Christ!
But I will give you a message. The message of death!
Come out to play.
Make no attempt to capture them. They are to be exterminated.
Matron, take them away! Oh.
Dada speaks to you.
Mrs. Peel, we're needed.
Oh, hello there. And welcome to part 2 of this retrospective look back and review of the Avengers television show. It is now the year 1967, and by this time the show had come into its 5th season, the second with Rigg, and had finally taken the step into glorious technicolour. It was also beginning to be made to appeal to a more worldwide audience. Well, we say worldwide, it was more like North America. But American TV channels were happy to pay big money to have these shows broadcast for their audiences. In fact, selling a TV series to America would make a studio more money than selling it to the rest of the world combined.
And as a result of this new worldwide audience, the Avengers did make a few concessions to make it appeal more to the American market, but it was still able to keep its quintessential Britishness, which was still the show's main selling point. Although the Avengers is probably the reason why most visiting Americans to Great Britain think that we all live in stately homes and castles. And, you know, we do. We've all got a castle over here. Didn't you know that? We have had it up to here, with fecking castles.
We just long for a bungalow or something.
And as a result of its new American audience, the Avengers found themselves having to tone down some of the more surreal and comedic aspects to the series, but that didn't mean that every so often the storylines would still go off into some fairly wacky territory.
These two villains have swapped minds with Steed and Emma. So at the moment, the villains look like this, while our delightfully dashing duo Steed and Emma look like this.
Or our heroes would find themselves in some sort of overly complicated and overly elaborate death trap, which is something that the 1960s Batman television series was also doing at the same time.
I'm going to place him in an easily escapable situation involving an overly elaborate and exotic death.
Why don't you just shoot him now? I mean, I'll go get a gun, we'll shoot him together. It'll be fun. Bang! Dead. Done.
One more peep out of you and you are grounded, mister, and I am not joking.
Plots would often delve into the realms of science fiction or fantasy, but before the end credits started rolling, they would dial it back with the eventual explanation of it wasn't really time travel, or it wasn't really aliens, it was just a fancy laser. Yes, again. The season had a kind of format, 2 or 3 people being murdered in an unusual way, and then Steed and Peel getting the call to say that they're needed. And these calls to action would often occur during the most inconvenient of times, such as poor Emma trying to get on with stripping off here.
What?
Her wallpaper.
Oh, right, okay. Please do try to control yourself, David. Anyway, the repeated line of Mrs. Peel, "We're needed," would become the catchphrase of the show.
We're needed. We're needed.
There was a killer who electrocuted his victims, a plot involving the process to shrink objects.
There you are, Mrs. Peel.
And a village that turned a blind eye to murder. Shades of the Wicker Man there. Not to mention a return visit to the series of its only recurring threat, those pesky Cybernauts, this time with Pete Cushing taking the lead role of the villain, controlling them from Michael Gough.
My turn.
what a shame that the show never did a crossover with John Pertwee's Third Doctor in the 1970s. Now that would have fitted together rather well. Don't you think so, John?
Splink! 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 Splink!
Oh, you're back!
Cushion's frequent horror co-star Christopher Lee would even turn up in the episode Never, Never Say Die as a baddie who controls an army of robotic doppelgangers to carry out diabolical deeds for his own benefit, which sounds an awful lot like Westworld and Stepford Wives and Casino Royale 1967.
Yeah.
They loved using that storyline over and over again.
In fact, throughout the years, the Avengers featured an absolute who's who of British acting talent, including the likes of not just Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Michael Gough, but also Brian Blessed, Bernard Cribbins, John Cleese, John Pertwee, Nicholas Courtney, Roger Delgado, Anthony Ainley, Ronnie Barker, Julian Glover, and many of the cast from Dad's Army.
Well done for reading that out in one breath.
Thank you.
I actually had a longer version than that planned, and then I thought,
Should have put in a longer version. I still would have done it.
I should have done.
Boom.
It's unethical, just not cricket.
You said that too.
We need a drink.
That you haven't said.
The fifth season was colourful, stylish, and a lot of fun. They also tended to be the episodes that got repeated on television more often, mainly because they were in colour, and also because of the wonderful, wonderful pairing of Steed and Peel that audiences still remember the most fondest to this very day.
To turn up in armour really is very inconvenient.
You're telling me I couldn't find a dress to match it?
But it wasn't all fun and games. Behind the camera was a different matter altogether.
Diana Rigg, at several points during her tenure on the series, was unhappy with certain aspects and wanted to leave. The increased workload was beginning to get very demanding for her, and it was preventing her from getting to perform on the stage, which was her main passion at the time. When she found out that the cameramen were being paid more than she was, that was the final straw. She asked for a pay rise. They said no, so she quit. If it wasn't for ABC's tight-fisted sexism, we might have had a bit more Steed and Peel bastards.
Can't believe that.
When you find out, and I believe she found out accidentally.
Yeah. So she was never supposed to know.
She was never really supposed to know. I think she knew that Patrick Macnee was getting more as Steed.
He had been around for longer.
And he had been around for longer and what have you. But it was never mentioned. So, but yeah, when you find out that, hello, you're the actress, you're the second lead of the series, and you're getting paid less than the cameraman. And let's be honest, can we blame her?
No.
No.
Not at all. Not at all.
I absolutely refuse to do it.
So Diana Rigg would sadly leave the show after the fifth season, where she would appear in films like The Assassination Bureau,
which is brilliant,
Julius Caesar, and of course she would follow Honor Blackman into a James Bond film when she appeared in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Best Bond film ever.
Rigg had been hired to provide the film some much-needed star power, seeing as Sean Connery had stepped down from playing 007 at this point, and an inexperienced lead had replaced him in the form of George Lazenby, who of course would go on to play Bond just the once, thanks to some of the most appalling, dreadful career advice ever from his agent, who said, "Yeah, these aren't gonna carry on, George. You're better off doing something else."
And then he turned up to the premiere, by which point he had grown a full beard.
Yeah.
And the producers, Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, just turned around, Bond does not have a beard.
Yeah.
But I do. So,
yeah. Rigg's performance in this would become one of the most memorable Bond girls in the entire series, to the point where even after Lazenby moved on and we had Connery and Roger Moore, they would still refer to that character of Tracy Bond.
So, despite the falling out over pay, Diana Rigg did come back for one last appearance in the opening episode of season 6, so that Emma Peel could be officially written out of the series. She and Steed could say goodbye, and that the role of Steed's sidekick could be properly handed over to newcomer Tara King.
He likes his tea stirred.
Yes, it turns out that Emma's husband, Mr. Peter Peel, who had been missing, presumed dead all this time, was now found, and so at the end of that episode, the two Peels drive away together and, well, She definitely has a type, I'll give her that.
So, Emma Peel was gone, and in her place came Tara King, played by Linda Thorson, who was fresh out of drama school at the time. And like what happened with Emma Peel first becoming Kathy Gale Mark II, Tara King was made up to be similar to be Emma Peel at first. Like Kathy and Emma before, Tara could also hold her own in a scrap.
Practically everyone does when they hear my name. Tara, you see. Ta-ra-ra-boom-dear.
Now, the first few episodes were apparently a bit of a disaster. 2 of them are even deemed unsuitable for broadcast. The scripts seemed to be missing the series' magic, and dramatic rewrites had to be made. And ABC seemed so determined to shake off the Emma Peel influence that they insisted that Thorson dyed her hair blonde, which actually resulted in all her hair falling out. As a result of this, some of Tara King's early stories see Thorson wearing a wig, and it was quite a time before her natural brunette locks grew back.
Hello, Tara King.
Steed had answered to numerous bosses over the series who would pop up from time to time, but this final season introduced another, the cigar-chomping Mother, played by Patrick Newell. Mother was mainly wheelchair-bound, having been cut down in his prime by a stray bomb blast. Mother also had a running gag where his base of operations, or his office, would be set in weird locations such as a swimming pool, a field of buttercups, or the top of a double-decker bus. Yes, I know I'm saying it again, but no, I'm not making this up.
He really isn't. McNee didn't particularly like this new character being brought in, but he did like the actor. So in fact, he would remain on very, very good terms with most of his castmates. Although in his autobiography, he does admit he was a little harsh on Linda Thorson's performance. He was, understandably, devastated to see the departure of Diana Rigg, whom he'd absolutely adored, and felt that things just weren't the same without her. And although there was absolutely nothing wrong with Thorson's performance at all, she just had the misfortune to come after Honor Blackman and Diana Rigg.
It's also very likely that McNee wasn't thinking too clearly at the time, because he was becoming addicted to, unknowingly, amphetamines, which were prescribed to him by his doctor with the intention of helping him lose some weight. It was only when McNee tried to get, and was refused, a repeat prescription when he was visiting Australia that he realised the tablets he were taking were in fact a dangerously addictive type of speed.
Whoa, hang on. Don't you dare put a clip of the apple in here now. We have already covered that abomination. Don't do it, ever.
America, the home of the brave, is popping pills to keep up the pace. And every day she cries out for more speed. From New York out to LA, everybody does it her way. Pumping power by the hour. Speed.
I'm going to kill him now.
It's the joke that just keeps on giving.
Moving swiftly on. The final season is certainly entertaining enough. It's competently made, and audiences grew to enjoy the new pairing of Steed and Tara King. But whilst the show still had its quirky and silly touches, its outlandish design and its exaggerated characters, it didn't feel quite as amusing. It felt like the Avengers had lost a little bit of its charm. It was a little more serious. The playful surrealism that had come to define the 5th season had been dialed back a bit. There was the odd occasion when the show dipped its toe back into something a little quirkier, such as the episode Game, where seemingly harmless board games become deadly weapons. But the 60s style that had pervaded the Diana Rigg episodes was clearly changing into a more sort of slightly garish look of the early 1970s, for better or worse.
In the US, ratings of the 6th season had gone severely down thanks to competition from other shows, and from there the writing was on the wall. The final season appears to leave Steed and King stranded in space, but there's an assurance that they will be back one day.
They will be back. You can depend on it.
Which is also how the last episode of The New Adventures of He-Man ended. Bit odd, that. Anyway, the Avengers made such an impression to the pop culture consciousness that the series would often be playfully parodied in other television shows.
I saw that on television.
Very good, but keep your voice down, Mrs. Peel.
Although, the Avengers itself wasn't afraid of lightly making fun of some of its other rival television programmes, with some episodes named as obvious parodies of shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Mission Impossible, for example.
And this one scene in particular which wouldn't have looked out of place in the Batman television series being broadcast at the time. Splat indeed.
After the series ended, Patrick Macnee followed in the footsteps of his previous co-stars, Honor Blackman and Diana Rigg, by appearing in a Bond film himself in A View to a Kill. The success of the show meant that Macnee wouldn't be short of work for many, many years, as he would move to America and become known as that guy who appeared in pretty much everything. Horror movies, episodes of TV shows, providing voices for the series Battlestar Galactica, and making numerous guest appearances in the likes of Magnum, War of the Worlds, Spinal Tap. He even shows up in Thunder in Paradise, for crying out loud, acting alongside Hulk Bloody Hogan.
If anyone knows of any reason why these two people should not be married, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. This marriage is a deception and a fraud. It's based on commercial enterprise, not love, and I shall reveal it as such.
Finish the ceremony.
Honor Blackman and Diana Rigg would appear in numerous other television shows and films as well. Both of them would indeed make guest appearances on Doctor Who, the latter appearing with her daughter Rachel Sterling. And Diana Rigg would of course gain an entire new generation of fans whenever she turned up in Game of Thrones as Lady Olenna, a woman with infinite sass.
You can smell the shit from 5 miles away. I eat from plates stamped with roses. I sleep in sheets embroidered with roses. I have a golden rose painted on my chamber pot, as if that makes it smell any better. What is your name again? Barbara?
Obara.
You look like an angry little boy. Don't presume to tell me what I need.
Forgive my sister. What she lacks in diplomacy, she makes...
Shut up, dear. Anything from you? No. Good. Bring me some cheese.
The cheese will be served after the cakes, my lady.
The cheese will be served when I want it served, and I want it served now. Luckily for you, the Queen Regent is rather distracted at the moment, mourning her dear departed boy, accusing her brother of his murder, which he didn't commit.
Well, he could have done.
I could have done, but he didn't.
You don't know, Grandmother.
But I do know. You don't think I'd let you marry that beast, do you?
Linda Thorsten also has an extensive list of guest star appearances, popping up in the likes of Moonlighting, Dynasty, Law and Order, Silent Witness, Schitt's Creek, and many other shows. She does have a regular role between 2006-2007 as the villainous Rosemary King in the ITV soap series Emmerdale.
Oh, bloody hell, she did!
Yes, believe it or not. And she even popped up as a Cardassian in Star Trek The Next Generation.
You are remarkably short-sighted, new dad.
Behind the scenes, producers Albert Fennell, Brian Clemens and composer Laurie Johnson would form a new production company that would go on to make the new Avengers in the mid-1970s. More on that in a moment. And for some reason, Clemens went on to become a writer on Highlander 2 The Quickening, which we covered in our previous episode, and oh boy, that was a mess.
You don't really believe all this rot, do you?
Even though there were no episodes of the show being made anymore, the popularity of the Avengers meant that it would get repeats and reruns again and again, not just in Europe and America, but even down under as well, winning it a whole new legion of fans. From there, the Avengers would get a stage play, a radio series, a number of Big Finish audio stories, and numerous pieces of merchandise. Macnee and Thorson even briefly returned to their roles as Steed and King for a French champagne commercial. So you could say that the Avengers might have gone, but it never truly went away.
Son invitados tuyos. ¿Te molestaría encargarte tú sola de recibir a tus amigos? Permíteme que te explique, querida. El champán Laurent Perrier debe tomarse en su justa temperatura. Exactamente debe servirse entre 44 y 46 grados. Y sobre todo en la más estricta intimidad. Espero que no venga nadie más esta noche.
So it was only a matter of time before a brand new spin-off series was commissioned. Right, that's it for part 2. We're going to take another short break and follow Steed and King's example and get our champagne flutes refilled. When we come back in part 3, we'll be making the jump from the 60s to the 70s, where we'll be taking a look at the new spin-off series, The New Avengers. And I suppose we better take a look at that 1998 Avengers film as well. You can tell I'm putting this off, can't you? See you in part 3.